A moment ago, I found out it was hooked up when it wasn't supposed to be hooked up, and I could hear myself clearing my throat. You all probably heard that too. My apologies on that. Thank you, Stu. It's really an honor to be here in Dunedin. I think this is the first time I've been here. The way travel goes, you forget where all you've been, but I've been to Auckland a few times and to Wellington, and your beautiful tourist spot of Rotorua. Enjoyed that many years ago with my wife, and I've got one of my dearest friends, Bruce Robinson. I don't know if he is here, but he came into Australia when I was speaking there last year. He's from Auckland. Hopefully I'll get to see him before this week is over. We just arrived today. My throat will do well as the week goes on. Please bear with me. I've been on a hectic schedule doing many university campuses in the United States. Normally just to do one takes months of preparation, but we've done 4 of them: the Arizona State University, University of Michigan, Michigan State University, and Indiana University, all within about a 10 to 11 day span. And then day before yesterday, I was in Dallas, Texas, speaking there, and yesterday flew out of Houston to arrive through Auckland and just arrived this afternoon. So we're 18 hours to the plus, and whether in the body or out of the body, we cannot tell, but we are here, and I'm really excited that 3 of my colleagues, or at least 2 colleagues and 1 daughter of a colleague here, and Michael Ramsden and Dan Patterson will be joining us tomorrow too for the Q&A time. Thank you so much. You may not know this, but New Zealand has had a huge impact on India. At least from the Christian viewpoint. When I left India, I was 20 years old in 1966. I turned 70 last year. Hard to believe, but that's a fact. But at the age of 20, when I left India, the entire Youth for Christ staff of Delhi comprised of New Zealanders. And I was so thrilled with them. Ray Harrison from Wellington has had a huge impact on our lives and was one of the gifted leaders out there. Ruth Hutting Ferguson, who passed away some years ago, was also in the office there, and I could go through many of the names. But thank you for all you've done. You're a small country, but you've had a big impact. And of course, is India playing cricket here right now or something? I don't know if they did or were they attempting to play cricket? I don't know. Every time I follow them, they lose, so I don't follow them much anymore. But I played in my days in the 60s. They've given me a variety of themes, and not a single one of them is easy. When you're given such extraordinary topics of significant, defining importance, you know you can't do justice to any one of those. But I'm going to attempt, and I'm going to try my best to deal with this, but you're going to have to give me your undivided attention. I don't normally do stadium venues because you can't compete against too many distractions, but you're a good audience, you're listening so well. And before I even go any further, Jade, amazing story, absolutely amazing story. But that's what the work of Christ is really all about. If you don't know Jesus Christ, you may have come here with a plurality of questions. You may have even come here half mocking or half doubting. I don't know. I don't know who you are or if that is your stance. But I heard her story and I thought to myself, I hear these stories thousands of times every year. My own story was from a bed of suicide when I was 17 years old in the city of Delhi. Jesus transforms the human heart and changes not only what you do, but changes what you want to do. He transforms your hungers. And if you will just give him a fair hearing and with an open heart say, I'm willing to listen, speak to me. I will do my best to answer the question that has been provided for me. Truth. Whose truth? What truth? What does truth really mean? I want to read for you a passage because it was a fascinating story with Jesus talking to Pontius Pilate. And in that interaction that they had, you will notice Pilate is deliberately bringing every possible tension into the conversation. Racial tension, political tension, all of these issues that were just beating heavily upon that culture and that society of the time. And he's trying to draw Jesus into controversy. So here's what he says he's talking to Jesus, and he says this to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He looks at Jesus and says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Now, this is a man who's representing Rome. And he purposely positions that statement that way. He's creating that political disconnect with society. And Jesus answers his question with a question. He says, "Is that your own idea," Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" Let me pause and say this to you. More often than not, when Jesus was asked a question, he questioned his questioner before he answered his questioner. Why is that important? Because when you question your questioner, you do two things. You force the questioner to open up within his or her own assumptions. You compel the questioner to disclose their hand, what it is they're really assuming in the question. But the second thing it does is it determines the entry point of the discussion. Is that your own idea, or has someone else set you up to ask this? You see, intent is prior to content. George MacDonald said this, "To give truth to him who loves it not is only to give him more multiplied reasons for misinterpretation." To give truth to somebody who doesn't love the truth is only to give them more multiplied reasons for misinterpretation. And then Pilate says to him, "Am I a Jew? It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you've done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But my kingdom is from another place." "Ah, you are a king then," said Pilate. Here's the real answer now. Jesus answered, "You are right in saying I'm a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. I came to testify to the truth, and everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Not only did he lay out what his testimony was about, but he turned it on to the questioner and said, whether you're listening to the truth or not is going to be demonstrated by whether you are really in conformity to what I'm going to say to you. That was an audacious response, an audacious statement to make. And of course, when he spoke to Thomas, he had said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me." Truth is the most valuable thing in the world, said Winston Churchill. It is the most valuable thing in the world. In fact, it is so valuable that often, he said, it is protected by a bodyguard of lies. Truth is the most valuable thing in the world. It's so valuable that often it is protected by a bodyguard of lies. He was talking primarily about military intelligence. Natan Sharansky, the former Justice Minister of Israel, one-time political prisoner in the former Soviet Union. He'd been incarcerated for a long time in solitary confinement before he was released. He went back to his homeland of Israel and asked one day if he could return and pay a visit. And he brought his wife with him, and he asked if he could go to the prison where he had been held for so long. And he arrived with his wife, and as he was about to enter the prison, she put her arm in his and wanted to walk in with him. He took her arm out and said, "If you don't mind, let me go back in alone for a few moments, please," because it was in that solitary confinement that I really found out what life was all about. So he stepped into the prison, stayed there several minutes in that dark, confined room for a little while again, and when he walked out, he asked them if he could visit the grave of Andrei Sakharov, the Soviet physicist who had given to the former Soviet Union the atomic bomb. So he asked for a wreath, went to the gravesite, laid the wreath, and when he turned around, there was a battery of microphones awaiting with journalists wanting to interview him. Before he let them interview him, here's what he said. He said, Mr. Sakharov gave to us here the atomic bomb. Before he died, he made this statement, I always thought the most powerful weapon in the world was the bomb. I always thought the most powerful weapon in the world was the bomb. He said, I have changed my mind. The most powerful weapon in the world is not the bomb. The most powerful weapon in the world is the truth. He said that to a nation that had been taught so much through living lies. And so you've got Churchill in the free world. The most valuable thing in the world is the truth. You've got Andrei Sakharov from a world where propaganda was the norm. And he said the most powerful weapon in the world is the truth. Most valuable, most powerful. Isn't it ironic that the Oxford Dictionary writers introduced the first new word from 2016 into the dictionary in 2017? Post-truth. We are living in a post-truth society, they said. What does that mean? It means two things. There is a soft definition of it, and there is a hard definition of it. The soft definition basically means that the average person today doesn't really care about the facts. They care more about their feelings. Don't tell me what the fact is. I want to know what I want to feel. And the entire electioneering process in the United States was beclouded by this phrase, post-truth, post-truth, post-truth. Are we really hearing the truth? But here's the harder definition of post-truth. Listen to me carefully. It is not merely that you don't care about the facts, you're more concerned about your feelings, but that you are even willing to use falsehood so long as in your mind you can justify that the end result is worth pursuing. You understand what I'm saying? It's not just that the ends justifies the means. You can spread lies, you can spread distortions, you can fabricate stories under the political umbrella of saying the end that you have in mind is a noble end. So post-truth is the description of 21st century schizoid man. We no longer place value upon the truth. So if Jesus says he is the way, the truth, and the life, and if Jesus is really giving to us all that we need to know about the truth, what does that really mean? So I want to give you two very profound statements and then draw my deductions from it. You're going to have to listen carefully. One of my great heroes after my conversion was the famed English journalist Malcolm Muggeridge. Many of you may have read Muggeridge's writings. He knew how to fabricate a scenario in order to get an end result. He said the lie was stuck like a fishbone in the throat of the handheld microphone. The lie was stuck like a fishbone in the throat of the handheld microphone. He went to the Soviet Union to do a story on Stalin. He went enamored by communism, came away totally disillusioned by it, and wrote his book, Winter in Moscow. His own life had been moving along a constant lie till he found Jesus Christ himself, and he wrote the story in his book, Jesus Rediscovered. He has two profound statements on truth. I want you to listen to it carefully because he gives us the two nuances of what truth really is all about. Listen to the first one. Truth is very beautiful, more so, I think, than justice, today's pursuit, which can easily put on a false face. That's an incredible statement, that justice can put on a false face. He said that's why truth is so beautiful. In the nearly 7 decades I have lived through, the world has overflowed with bloodshed and explosions, whose dust has never had time to settle before others have erupted, all in purportedly just causes. The quest for justice continues, and the weapons of hatred are piling up, but truth was an early casualty. The lies on behalf of which our wars have been fought and our peace treaties concluded, the lies of revolution and of counter-revolution, the lies of advertising, of news, of salesmanship, of politics, the lies of the priest in his pulpit, the professor at his podium, the journalist at his typewriter, the lies stuck like a fishbone in the throat of the microphone, the handheld lies of the prowling cameraman. Ignatius Saloni told me once, when he was a member of the old Comintern, some stratagem was under discussion, and a delegate, a newcomer who had never attended before, made the extraordinary observation that if such and such a statement were to be made, it ought not to be made, because it wouldn't be true. There was a moment of dazed, stunned silence, and then everyone began to laugh. They laughed and laughed till tears ran down their cheeks, and the Kremlin walls seemed to shake. The same laughter echoes in every council chamber and cabinet room. Wherever 2 or more are gathered to exercise authority, it is truth that has died, not God. I remember when I spoke at the Center for Geopolitical Strategy in Moscow. I won't go into the details of that. The entire faculty were atheists. They were hostile. They were angry in all of their responses. My wife was sitting on one side, my colleague on the other side. They threw question after question with anti-theistic fervor, and I answered them patiently, one question after another. The hours had gone by, and I noticed there was a quietening. There was a more peaceful, ironic disposition. And as my wife and I were leaving, they all lined up. They kissed the back of my wife's hand, and they shook hands with me. And the principal of the entire institute there, which has graduated all of their leaders for the past few decades, he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Zacharias, I want to say something to you. What you have told us about God today, I believe to be true, but it is very difficult to change after 70 years of believing a lie." That's exactly what Malcolm Muggeridge is talking about. The lie in the halls of the Kremlin that were there again and again and again. But here's the point I want to lead to, Muggeridge's next statement. Please listen, it's brilliant. In this Sargasso sea of fantasy and fraud, how can I or anyone else hope to swim unencumbered? How can I learn to see through and not with the eye? How do I take off my own motley and wash away the makeup? Raise the iron shutter and put the studio lights, put out the studio lights, silence the sound effects and put the cameras to sleep. Can I ever watch the sun rise on Sunset Boulevard and the sunset over Forest Lawn? Can I find furniture among the studio props, silence in a discotheque, love in a striptease, read truth of an auto cue, or catch it on a screen, chase it on the wings of Muzak? Can I view it in living color with the news, hear it in living sound along the motorways, not in the wind that rent the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks, not in the earthquake that followed, nor in the fire that followed the earthquake, but in a still small voice, not in the screeching of tires, either on the grinding of brakes, or the roar of jets, or the whistle of sirens, or the howl of trombones, the rattle of drums, or the chanting of demo voices. Again and again, it's that still small voice, the voice of God, if one can only catch it. What Muggeridge has said in these 2 statements is what I want to expand upon within the time I have. The first has to do with statements having to conform with reality. That's the primary definition of truth. When an assertion is made, It conforms to reality. That's the test of truth in a courtroom. But in life, Muggeridge goes beyond that. He says, what is truth in my life that brings meaning in this Sargasso sea of fantasy and fraud? How can I ever hope to swim unencumbered? How can I find meaning in life? This is where I believe Jesus' truth is not only unique, but beautifully demonstrable. Beautifully demonstrable. I could give you a protracted talk on this. I don't have the time to do so. May I just take 3 or 4 reasons, existentially, from the point of view of meaning, why it is that Jesus' answers are so persuasive and so convincing, in contradistinction to anyone else's claim to divine or prophetic status. His answers are cogent, conforming to reality, and his answers are existentially relevant in providing meaning. Truth and relevance are the 2 feet on which life has to walk. Can I explain to you why I believe his answers are true and relevant? The first is his description of the human condition. He talks about the total depravity of the human heart, not merely in our actions, but in our condition. We are alienated from God. There is that clenched fist on the inside. Muggeridge put it this way: the depravity of man is at once the most empirically verifiable fact, at the same time that it is the most intellectually resisted. It is the most empirically verifiable fact. We see it all around us, but intellectually we do not like to accept it, and we do not like to admit it, that the human heart is depraved. If you ever read books on the Third Reich and Hitler's assault upon humanity, you will find every writer making this kind of statement somewhere. They were ordinary people. They were ordinary people who did these extraordinary, damnable things. In the 80s, during the Cold War, I had the privilege of being in Poland. And I went to visit Auschwitz. I had seen concentration camps before, but I'd never been to a death camp. So I wasn't mentally prepared for what I was going to see. When you walk into Auschwitz, I think every young man or young woman, if they have a chance in this lifetime, should go to Auschwitz and spend a whole morning or afternoon there. They will come away totally changed. I remember going from room to room. You see, in Auschwitz, they were eliminating them at the rate of 12,000 every day. Every day. You saw one room where it was just housing the suitcases and toothbrushes and clothes of little children. It is the hardest room of all to endure. When you see the pictures of little boys like bony skeletons, and Joseph Mengele would do his experimentation on them, castrating them, especially twins. And these little kids, so butchered at the hands of supposedly the most educated nation at that time. And when you walk into the room where they were gassed, just before that room, you see the words of Adolf Hitler. I want to see a generation of young people devoid of a conscience, imperious, relentless, and cruel. Imperious, relentless, and cruel. You see, they were herded in there by the hundreds, flesh against flesh, and they were told they were about to be deloused and given a shower. So their clothes were taken off them, and they would be herded in, and that iron door shut against them, and the spigots would be turned on. And as they would hear the gas coming, the last shout that the guards would hear was somebody would shout, "Gas!" and they were gone. Ordinary men, ordinary people. If you go to the room at Nuremberg where these judges were tried, there are two remarkable paintings in that room. Behind the justices is the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. And as you're exiting the room is the painting at the Garden of Eden, Satan tempting the first humans. You will be as gods. Amazing juxtaposing of two thoughts. Either we live by his law or we become a law unto ourselves. And you've seen what has happened in the 20th century. It's been the bloodiest century in history. We've killed more in battlefields than the previous 19 put together. Ordinary people, ordinary people. Ladies and gentlemen, we would be mistaken if we look at that and the enormity of that and say that's what darkness and sin is really about. No, friend, we never solve it that way until we look into our own hearts and admit that I am a creature in rebellion against God. I've got that clenched fist inside of me. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Anybody free from those three? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Jesus said the heart of man is desperately wicked, desperately wicked. And I say to you that description is worthy of your thought and mine. But there is a second that is so unique to the Christian faith. I mean, you heard Jade's testimony. You heard it loud and clear. Who would have ever imagined? That's the first time I've heard her tell her story. Imagine that a body that has been sexually abused, that has been abused with liquor and drugs and all of that, that has been abused with a broken home, all the brokenness around, and suddenly the grace of God breaks in. The grace of God breaks in like a shining light in a dark place. And you see yourself not in all the wretchedness that you're carrying, but in all the beauty to which He can take you. That's the story of the gospel. You will never read this in any other worldview. You ask an honest Muslim, how will you attain paradise? His or her answer will be very Quranic. Your good deeds will have to outweigh your bad deeds. You will be weighed in the balances. You ask a pantheist, how do you expect to attain nirvana or moksha? Their answer will be standard. Karma, karma, karma. You will have to pay in every life the payment for the previous wrongs. You ask a Christian, how do you know you will be in heaven? He'll tell you, you know what? I took my inheritance and squandered it. I was living in the far country. And I decided to go home, but I didn't know what my father would say to me, because I'd taken everything he'd given to me and blown it big time. And I turned around and decided to make my way home. And to my utter shock, my father leaves the confines of the home and comes running towards me to welcome me back. That part of the story would have caught the Middle Easterner by surprise. The rest of it could have been very predictable. He's blown it, he's this, he's coming back, he's going to say sorry. Have you ever seen an Eastern father? You rebel against that father, and you come along and fall flat on your face, and he will make you really do everything you could in your power to earn his reception again. Jesus said, no, that's not the father I'm talking about. I'm talking about the father who hears that his son is coming afar off, and he turns towards him and receives him. That is the surprise in the parable of the prodigal son, that the father comes out to receive him and welcome him. You ask the Christian, how do you know you will be in the house of your Father? It's because of his grace and his mercy and his love and forgiveness. I never earned it. That's the reality. I'll give you a quick illustration of this and turn to my final thought. I was speaking in the Middle East. Actually, I was on a delegation and a tour, along with the former Archbishop of Canterbury. There were 5 of us. We were visiting the Israeli leaders and the Palestinian leaders. It was one of the toughest trips I've ever taken in my life. And when I walked out of there, I said, who is ever going to bridge this? And on the last but one day, we were in the home of one of the 4 founders of Hamas. Solidly built guy. And I want to tell you, he was so angry through the whole conversation. He yelled and said all kinds of stuff when it was interpreted. I said, this man's been living with anger for so long. He'd been in prison for many years. He'd lost some of his sons in suicide bombing attempts and so on. And so we were just listening, and the Archbishop was the guest of honor. A few minutes left, and he looked at the 5 of us. He said, each one of you ask him one question. I asked mine. I won't tell you what it was. It was a private conversation. When that question was over, he answered it, and I looked at him and I said, Sheikh, I don't like your answer. I really don't like your answer. With your answer, there's never going to be peace in this part of the world. I said, let me just tell you one thing, sir, because I may never see you again. Please allow me to tell it to you, I said. A little distance from where you and I are sitting right now is a mountain. I said, 5,000 years ago, a man by the name of Abraham took his son up that mountain. Remember the story? He said, yes. I said, please, let's not debate which son. Let's just agree he took his son up to that mountain. And he's about to offer his son as a sacrifice, and as the axe is going to come down, God stops that arm. Remember that story? He said, yes. I said, what did God say? He was silent. God said, stop. I myself will provide. He said, that's right. I said, Sheikh, very close to where you and I are sitting 2,000 years ago, God kept that promise. He took his own son up that hill, and this time the axe did not stop. I said, I want to say something to you, Sheikh. Until you and I receive the son God has provided, we will be offering our own sons and daughters on the battlefields of this world for position and power and land and prestige. He just stared at me. I said, that's right. Until we receive his son that he provided, you'll be offering your own sons, and I'll be offering my own sons and daughters for battling for power, land, position, prestige. There was pin drop silence. The Archbishop said, it's time to go. So we turned around, walked away, and as we were walking down the steps, the Archbishop put his arm around me and he said, Ravi, that was of God. I said, I sure hope so. And as we went out, the Archbishop was the guest of honor, so the Sheikh was ushering him. We were walking to our own car a few yards away, but I heard feet running behind me. It was the Sheikh. I said, I'm finished. I'm going to be buried right here in Ramallah. It's all over. He's a strong guy. I've got 2 titanium rods holding my spine up. He twirled me around. Said, Mr. Zacharias? I said, yes, sir. He looked me in the eye for a good 4 or 5 seconds. He patted me on both sides of the face, kissed me on both sides of the face. He said, you're a good man. You're a good man. I hope someday I will see you again. He gave me a big bear hug. See, the answer of Jesus is so unique. God sent his son so that you and I do not have to offer our sons and daughters for position, power, land, and prestige. He wants to win your heart. He describes it, transforms it, and the only other truth I must leave with you, when they killed him, he rose again from the dead. Now, I want to tell you something. I know you may have thought of it, but I want to remind you of it. If Jesus were a charlatan, do you know what he would have said? Kill me, and I will spiritually rise again. Kill me, and I will spiritually rise again. He didn't do that. He said, when you kill me, I will bodily rise again. He gave the kind of proof that could have been falsified if it weren't true. If he'd said spiritually rise again, how do you falsify that? Bodily. The entire Christian story could have been smothered with just one piece of evidence, the body. He rose again from the dead to offer you eternal life. The description of your condition, the provision for your malady, is resurrection from the dead. There's a lot more I could say. Let me just ask you to think about it. And I say to you, his word is truth, conforms to reality, but he brings you meaning existentially with truth and relevance. May God richly bless you as you ponder these. I'm ready to take your questions, and Adam will be joining me for that. Thank you for giving me a hearing.